Nach Deutschland, jawohl. Bart Kellerman ist hier und es geht um die Frage der Quants. It's a mysterious term to many. Wir wissen, der Begriff kommt aus der Physik und vielleicht noch ein paar Worte zu dir, Bart. Freut mich erstmal, dass du hier bist und Bart spricht tatsächlich ein bisschen Deutsch.
Ein bisschen.
Du hast in Hamburg gelebt,
ja, für 4 Jahre. Aber als ich jung war, nur von 6 bis 10 Jahre alt und ich war für 2 Jahre Privatlehrer und die nächsten 2 Jahre war ich auf die Heinrich-Hertz-Schule in Hamburg, wohnte in Winterhude. Das war so viel Spaß, ich wollte nicht wieder nach Amerika fahren.
Und dann bist du im Prinzip direkt nach Amerika gegangen danach, ja?
Ja, danach, genau. Ja.
Und lass uns über das Thema Battle of the Quants reden. Ich will mal ganz kurz schauen, ob die Fragen reinkommen. Jawohl. Noch auf die jetzt noch hier. Wunderbar, klasse, die Fragen kommen auch schon rein. Wir werden die Fragen dann auch gleich alle einzeln absprechen. Aber Bart, sprechen wir als erstes über das, was du seit mittlerweile 15 Jahren machst. Battle of the Quants. What is Battle of the Quants?
Ja, Battle of the Quants und wir müssen jetzt Englisch
Stick
sprechen.
to English, I'll translate.
Okay, aber ich kann ein bisschen Deutsch verstehen. So, like 15 years ago, if you went to a hedge fund conference. It was basically a lot of traders, a lot of investors, and then there were the quants. And nobody really wanted to talk to the quants. As a matter of fact, they would put the quants in the corner and they wouldn't even give them the luxury of speaking on a panel.
And why is that, Bart?
Well, back in those days, nobody really knew what a quant was. They were typically those who were very introverted. They weren't very sociable. They're not the kind of guys that would go out for a beer at night because they'd be developing algorithms. Yet, unbeknownst to many people in a bank, the quants were the ones that were generating a majority of the revenue. And nobody really knew that. So when a quant would get on an elevator, everybody would wait for the next elevator because they didn't want to have some uncomfortable periods in which nobody would speak.
Because there were such different type of people, backgrounds, different backgrounds. You know, there's a big saying at the New York Stock Exchange, in der Cafeteria, in der Kneipe, da oben wurden mehr Aktien gehandelt als während der Handelszeit auf dem Parkett. But the old type, the classical trader, the broker that we also know from the New York Stock Exchange is a very different type of character, one has to say, right?
Absolutely.
So what is a quant guy? What kind of a background? Was macht ein Quant? Was für eine Ausbildung hat ein Quant?
Well, for the longest time, most of the quants on Wall Street had a physics background. Physics or mathematics, and they typically got a degree, an engineering degree from Carnegie Mellon, which is one of the premier schools, as well as MIT. You had quite a few. Emmanuel Derman came from Columbia Business School. You had a few from Princeton. But those are the key schools that graduated very advanced degree individuals who really had a good foundation in mathematics and statistics and physics. And these are the guys that went into the market and really got underneath time series. They got underneath what moves markets and really wanted to understand the basic building blocks of how markets worked and then obviously how to make money on them.
So, wenn wir uns das aktuelle Umfeld mal anschauen, sind die Quants natürlich mittlerweile extrem wichtig geworden, nicht wahr? Also ohne die Quants geht an der Wall Street eigentlich gar nichts mehr. If you look at the world of the quant right now, Bart, how important are they in regards to the interaction, the trading volumes, in regards to what happens on Wall Street?
Well, I mean, everybody knows that the majority of trades, and it's probably understated, but most of the trades that take place on Wall Street are done by some kind of quantitative algorithm or a strategy that's running at a hedge fund. But there are, you know, we all know what happened with Knight. You know,
when
the
Knight
Knight brokerage, when Knight went under,
yeah.
they basically put a bad algo out there. So within a matter of seconds, the company went under.
Yeah.
So there's thousands and thousands of trades going on per second, and the high-frequency trading guys create volumes of trades per second.
But the high-frequency trading guys, also der Hochfrequenzhandel, is not the majority of what's happening in the quant world, correct?
No, it's certainly a big part of the volume, and it was for a while, but that's kind of been tempered, and it's become more broad-based. Okay, so there are a lot more strategies because there are more people getting into the quant world. And if you look at the top 10 hedge funds by assets under management, I think it's depends on what time frame you're looking at it, but it's probably 7 6 to 7 of the largest volume traders on Wall Street are quantitative in nature. I'm talking the 2 Sigmas, the Millennials, the Millenniums, the World Quants, the D.E. Shaws. These guys are responsible for most of what's going on on Wall Street. And there are actually, listen to this, there are quant funds that follow successful quant funds and look at their buying and selling habits, whether it's by an algo, it's by an individual using the results of an algo that are making the actual execution trades.
Ich finde, was in den Beispielen schon schön ist, ne, wenn man diese Namen hört, ne, D.E. Shaw, D.E. Shaw, diese ganzen Hedgefonds, Sigma, das sind Namen, die wir kennen. We know those names. Yep. We work on Wall Street. Aber ich glaube, dass die meisten Privatanleger mit diesen Namen eigentlich gar nichts anfangen können. Wir schauen immer noch auf die JP Morgans, auf die Goldman Sachs dieser Welt, die auch natürlich eine große Rolle spielen in der Quantwelt. Aber die wirklich großen Jungs sind those are the hedge funds.
Absolutely.
Let's go back to Battle of the Quants.
Sure.
You're doing this since 15 years.
Well,
who are the major players that show up at your event?
Well, we get the ones I just mentioned are always there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of them like to come in a very quiet way and sit in the back of the room, because you'd be surprised how many hedge funds out there are looking for the next strategy, and how much they look at each other and copy each other. That's just part of the business, is finding out what other people are doing and seeing whether or not you can replicate it and do an even better job. But 15 years ago, as we said, nobody wanted to be a quant. And I saw a huge opportunity with just focusing and putting the quants on a pedestal and making an event, creating an event just for the quants. And what was interesting, 15 years ago, when only 10 to 15% of the marketplace was quantitative in nature, exclusively quantitative, and nobody wanted to be a part of that, I took these guys and I made a quant-only event. And it was either quant or discretionary. And the big fight was, well, it was almost like the Luddites were out there saying, don't put your trust in quants. You don't know where the money's going to go. Put your trust in a discretionary manager.
But that must have flipped 180 degrees, no?
And today, it's directly the opposite. When a quant 15 years ago would get on an elevator, you didn't want to get on. Now, they follow him on, and everybody wants to have the word quantitative in their strategy or quant as part of their resume, because it depicts somebody who can generate alpha in a very, very crowded, very complex marketplace.
Also Daten sind wahnsinnig wichtig geworden. Waren sie schon vor 15 Jahren, als diese ganze Welt groß geworden ist?
But it was a different data.
It was different data?
Right. It was market data. Back then, it was traditional tick data. It was market data, is what you get from Bloomberg. It's what you get from the typical data providers, which is backward looking, right?
So what happened today? How did the data change?
Well, all of a sudden, and I'll give you a really, really good example.
So, just for the explanation, wenn du von Marktdaten sprichst, dann sind es die traditionellen Daten quasi, wie eine Aktie gehandelt wird, the spreads in the stock, the historic movements at certain events.
The derivatives.
Die Derivate. Und wenn wir heute über Daten reden, Big Data sprechen, dann reden wir über einen eigentlich anderen Datensatz.
Okay, so there's big data, which is all data, right? But then as a part of that, and the most exciting part, and what's really energized the quantitative marketplace, is what's called alternative data. And the CEO of Panagora, who also, Panagora comes to all my events, calls it smart data. So this is data that you get from non-traditional methodologies. And I'll give you an example. A great example is, let's say you're in mergers and acquisitions, and different data has different value to different people. So if you're in, let's say, mergers and acquisitions, what's valuable to you is where are the big money people and the CEOs of corporations, where are they flying? Who are they meeting with? And you can tell what they have. There's actually a resource that you can buy on a monthly basis, and most of the data that you buy is on a subscription basis, from 5, 10, even $1 million a year. Every plane has an identifier, a number on the tail. As a matter of fact, I think the data source is called tail number. And you can find out where the corporate jet of that company is flying to and what airport they're going into, and then you extrapolate what company is within that airport, driving distance, and you can tell who these CEOs are meeting with, and maybe if they have 5 different, flights that they're taking, maybe those are the companies that are either going to take over or it's going to take them over. So you can
Also man kann letztendlich
estimate.
gesehen, das heißt, es gibt Daten, die zum Beispiel den Flugverkehr der Corporate Jets von Aktiengesellschaften misst. Du hattest, als wir uns das letzte Mal getroffen, auch ein sehr schönes Beispiel zu Tesla Motors war das.
Ja, ich kann das auch erklären.
Das fand ich auch faszinierend. Erklär das bitte nochmal.
So so this is not a mergers and acquisition guy. This is a long, short equity, short-term player. And he liked to take a lot of bets on Tesla. Obviously, it's very volatile, and it usually is around earnings that they determine, whether or not the stock's going to jump or go down. So what he did was he paid a company that analyzed, and believe it or not, cell phone companies sell the data out the back door to willing buyers. Obviously, there's a price.
But not including the phone numbers, I would think.
No,
just
they
like
don't
the
get
volume,
absolutely.
The calling volume.
A lot of the data is anonymized, and that's sort of the trick to staying within the rules and regulations of Reg D and not, limiting information to only a couple of people. Data privacy, especially. So AML. So basically, they collected data on the number of cell phone calls that were coming out of Tesla's main plant, and they determined that there were just as many calls going out on in the evening, which meant that they had added a third shift. Having added a third shift, they extrapolated the fact that a third shift would add X amount of number of cars to the delivery within that quarter, so they would have made their numbers. And Tesla was all about making the numbers, regardless of quality, because apparently there was a very high failure rate in those cars. But the bottom line is, and what Wall Street wanted to see was numbers. Well, this particular hedge fund manager saw that they were adding a third shift, went hugely long on the Tesla stock. Certainly, as the earnings came out, they exceeded their goals, and the stock shot through the air, and the customer made a lot of money. I know he paid a lot of money.
Das ist natürlich schon ein bisschen her, ne? Also das waren jetzt nicht die jüngsten Quartalszahlen, weil Tesla ja schwächer war, aber es ist ein schönes Beispiel, wie auch hier Daten, also das Call-Volumen quasi, das Anrufvolumen bei Tesla Motors viel darüber ausgesagt hat, wie viele Aktivitäten da sind. Ich meine, the examples are endless, ne? The satellites that are used for traffic at Walmart stores, at McDonald's stores.
That is getting increasingly sophisticated, because what Orbital Insights, what they typically do is they will give you basic numbers, but now they're looking at doing now they can start seeing through clouds. Now they have low-flying aircraft. Now they have different resources to really identify, and they also have so the company the company that does the cell phone usage. You combine the cell phone with the satellite, and you sort of mix them together, and now you get an even better view, because now the cell phone guy can actually give you anonymized, but they can give you the income level of the person that's going to a Walmart. So if the average price goes up, or value income of that person going to Walmart or another store, it gives you again more insight. So the data is getting much more granular.
Also was ich immer wieder erstaunlich finde, wenn man das so anhört, ne? Also unser eins, ne? Wir lesen, Goldman Sachs sagt, IBM ist ein Kauf, und dann schaut man sich das an. Wenn man aber sieht, was heute schon möglich ist von der Datentiefe, dann sieht man, dass es eben nicht mehr nur um Geschwindigkeit ankommt, also the usual, high frequency, the faster the better, but also the data quality and the data depth that you can get. Und ganz interessant bei BART, jetzt auch bei Battle of the Quants in New York, was gerade neulich war, ist die Headline Big Data, also dieses Mergen von Quant-Strategien und von Big Data Strategien.
Genau.
How has that changed in the last couple of years, and how has the quality of data gotten better?
Well, okay, so it is like night and day. Prior to this whole and I'm going to use the word alternative data, because as I said, most of the term big data refers to traditional data, although it encompasses everything. It's sort of more of a traditional label. The new label, and that is what Battle of Quants Big Data is, because I don't want to exclude the fact sets of the world who are using, sending traditional data.
So what is that you call alternative data?
Again, anything that is in addition to or different than the traditional data sets that you got
from market data,
from Bloomberg, from Thomson Reuters, which is just regular market data. What happened today on Wall Street? Okay, how many people bought this stock? You see all those histograms and all the different pipes and everything. That's traditional data. The new data is, I would say, let me classify it by example. Credit card data, for example.
Kreditkartendaten.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily directly relate to something, but it infers something happening. So you have credit card data, orbital insight, satellite data. The cell phone data, that company's called Thesos, by the way. And then you have, what we were talking about before, other data sets other than your traditional data set.
So you cross-reference those data also?
There is it's very rare that you find a quant manager who's only buying one alternative data set, because they're buying multiple data sets and then they're putting them all together in order to get a better view of the market, because the more you have, the more future predictability you have, and that's what they want.
Also letztendlich geht es dann darum, wenn Investmententscheidungen in diesen großen Hedgefonds getroffen werden, dass man sich natürlich nicht nur auf einen Datensatz verlässt, sondern viele unterschiedliche Datensätze hat, die man dann im Prinzip vergleicht, Überschneidungen findet und darauf basiert dann eben auch seine Entscheidung trifft. There's one great question here. There are many great questions. Gehen wir mal auf eure Fragen kurz ein. Wo ist er denn hier? Okay, so I think the question is, before I start looking even longer, the question was, is there a way of quantifying how much of these data, here it is. Yeah. Blenden wir mal die Frage hier ein von, den Namen wiederhole ich jetzt mal nicht, cool auf jeden Fall. Ja? How much of the quant trades are value-driven long-term investments? Is there even a possibility of quantifying that? Kann man das quantifizieren?
Well, there are quant global macro players. So they're looking at, from a strictly numbers standpoint, whether to go long a certain country. And
global macro means that, based on fundamental economic data, right?
Right.
Yeah,
and they're supplementing that with alternative data.
Yeah.
Maybe how many people are actually buying cell phones and using cell phones, or some other measure in order to go long. And that's more of a long-term trade. So yes, to answer your question is, how much of the quant trades are value-driven? I would say not a majority. I'd say a minority of. Although, one of the largest hedge funds in the world is $130 billion, and they use a lot of quant data to make their global macro and long-term trades.
Can one actually
that's Ray Dalio.
Yeah, of course, from Bridgewater.
Hedge fund. So those guys, it's funny because a lot of people will say, oh yeah, they're a quant fund, but they're not a quant fund because they do discretionary trades. But they're using quantitative data in order to support their decision making, and then it's a human that actually pulls the trigger based on their economic data and all the other data that they can use in order to define whether or not there's going to be a long or short trade. So yes, it's definitely used for that, but I would say the majority of quants are really more quarterly or within a year, smaller time frame trades.
Okay, but smaller time frame, we're not talking milliseconds.
No.
You're talking more on a quarterly or 6-month kind of basis.
Yes.
Also im Prinzip geht es wirklich darum, das finde ich in dem Gespräch auch am interessantesten, dass man diese Daten, diese alternativen Daten zunehmend nutzt, um quasi vorhandene fundamentale Daten oder Marktdaten zu referenzen und quasi zu untermauern. So you basically take quant data and big data, alternative data, to substantiate.
Absolutely.
And help you in decision taking. Eine Frage noch ganz gut hier von Peter Müller, und da muss ich ein bisschen schmunzeln, und die Antwort wird relativ einfach sein. So die Frage, I'm going to translate this one for you. But banks, the traditional banks have left the proprietary. They're pretty much no more proprietary trading desks on Wall Street. Also die Banken haben sich aus dem Eigenhandel zurückgezogen. Das sind bei uns die sogenannten proprietary trading desks. Mhm. Das mag bei den Banken so sein, but that's not the case. Who took the place of the banks instead? Because you still have, like, the quant guys, the quant funds, doing obviously trading on their own account.
Well, the BlackRocks of the world, there are non-bank-oriented financial institutions that are, offer wealth managers have a whole host of strategies underneath their purview. And of course, the big quant funds have just gotten bigger. There are tons of quant, launches that are taking place, more so than I've seen in a long time. Asia is really starting to come alive. in terms of quant managers, which
Yeah.
I was just recently in Hong Kong, and I was surprised at how many small quant traders are getting into the business, and they're usually coming from having run quants in a larger institutional framework. So yeah, it's the wealth managers and index funds. They're all getting into a certain amount of quant. It seems like everybody wants to be in the quant business now, which is exactly the opposite of what it was 15 years ago.
Because you see the quality of big data has improved, of alternative data has improved.
And also the access to computer power and data is now unprecedented, right? So processing data, storage, and data itself, all of those have just blossomed. And now, last year, according to LinkedIn, the #1 job was to be a data scientist. You could probably make $200,000 to $300,000 as a straight data scientist working for a quant fund. But if you know how to look at the data and make a trade and generate alpha, that's a $1 million plus job.
Ja, interessant, dass natürlich logischerweise die Speicherkapazität und die Geschwindigkeit der Rechner wesentlich größer geworden ist und dadurch natürlich auch die Datenqualität besser geworden ist. Finde ich eine schöne Frage hier noch von Christian. Is there data how much it costs the fund to collect such data and how relevant in terms of success, assuming lots of the big data may not result in profitable trade investment. So I would like to split that up a little bit, weil die Frage ist
That's
super
a great
spannend.
question.
Das ist eine
very good
super
question.
Frage.
Yeah.
Also erstmal
The others were good too.
The others were great too, ja. Die kommen ja noch dazu, aber um sich mal eins vor Augen zu halten, das nur generell, before you jump in, man muss sich mal vor Augen halten, dass alleine unter der IC, also der New York Stock Exchange, ich glaube 12 unterschiedliche Plattformen existieren. Jeder Datenfeed, jeder einzelnen Plattform wird gesondert abgerechnet und die Börsen verdienen heutzutage eigentlich, ich würde mal schätzen, 60-70%, zumindest hier in New York, durch den Verkauf von Daten. Also der Zugang zu Daten ist richtig teuer, I would think, right? I mean, and so let's go to this question. I wonder what you're going to say about that. I mean, must be hard to put a price tag on big data per se, and then of course there also, you know, if you feed machines with crappy data, you would get crappy data out, right?
Yep.
So
you got it.
What?
So the thing is, it's interesting because in that question are a lot of panel discussions that we have at the Battle of Quants, because a lot of those questions haven't been answered. The main question is, what is the cost of data? And people have been struggling with that because 5 years ago, if you bought data from Orbital Insight, it was $1 million a year. Now, it's a fraction of that. Why? Because there are others offering it. Why? Because they've found, there's just more opportunities, more availability, so the prices come down, like with any new product. But here's what's interesting. I mentioned earlier that there was a global macro trader, and he values certain data. Then there are short-term traders, they value certain data. There's a long-short equity guy who really valued the Tesla data. So depending on who you are, different data is valuable to you. Although they typically sell the data between, they usually start off at $5,000, and they sell it on a subscription basis, so it's a phenomenal business. They'll say, okay, for $5,000 a month, because it's constantly being replenished, we'll give you this data set. It could be from $5,000 a month to $1 million a year. There's a data marketer, a person who sells data. I think he only has 5 clients, and these are all the big quant funds, but it's $1 million a year. But he only needs 5 clients. But then there's guys that sell, tons of cell phone or credit card data. There's a proliferation of credit card data, but nobody has all credit cards, all transactions under one roof. So you find different sections, different times. So it's really subjective to a large extent. They try to standardize it, but it's very hard to standardize because different data has different value. But we're always wrestling with that issue. What really is the value of data?
It's a little bit to me like Starbucks, right? So when Starbucks came up, what is Starbucks selling? Was verkauft Starbucks? Verkauft Kaffee. Ja? Warum sollte jetzt man für einen Starbucks-Kaffee $6 zahlen? Macht überhaupt keinen Sinn, ist immer noch Kaffee. Aber Starbucks hat es geschafft, im Prinzip den Kaffee als Lifestyle zu verkaufen. Und damit kann man das anders preisen. Ja? And of course, look, if I pay $1 million for data, and that data grosses me $10 million, I'll pay the $1 million, right? Also das heißt, die Qualität ist immer mitentscheidend und wie das Ganze im Konzept reinpasst. Ja?
Yeah, and different people leverage the data in different ways. So some can make a lot of money on it, others haven't figured it out yet. So it's really interesting because 15 years ago, it was about the strategy. It was factor-based strategies or high-frequency strategies or CTAs, trend-following strategies. All you focused on was the strategy. And you never even, the data was a non-issue. And now it's almost like the discussions, and especially at the Battle of the Quants, we hardly even talk about strategies anymore. We talk about data and how valuable is the data. Do you build your own data infrastructure or do you buy from outside? And how do you find the right data? Now, sort of it's evolving. The data world is actually evolving. We talked about it this morning, how the London Stock Exchange is considering doing a deal with Refinitiv.
So there's more im Datenbereich heute bekannt gegeben, also möglicherweise, I don't know if it was confirmed or not.
It was the discussions are there and they want to go ahead with it. It's pending approval because there are some issues there. But there are, depending on who you talk to, there's probably between 1,000 and 1,500 data sets out there of any value at all. And now what's happening is there are these data consolidators, okay? So, for example, Eagle Alpha, if you go into their website, you can type in the type of data you're looking for and it'll index and give you basically 5 to 10 different responses. Then you can call them and say, hey, which one, based on what I'm trying to do, is the best. So it's getting a lot more, the distribution of data is becoming a lot more efficient. And what a lot of people are doing, the smart people, they're going into companies and going into their records, down into the basement, and they're opening the file cabinets, and they're finding data, historical data, that could have an impact on markets, and then bringing that out, and then creating a sellable format, and then going out into the market and selling it on a subscription basis. So and because the money is there, data is coming from all sources, and if you ask somebody where we are in this alternative data world, they said in a baseball game is typically in 9 different sections, right? We're about basically in the 3rd section or the 3rd inning. We have 9 innings in a baseball game. We're only in the 3rd inning. So that tells you.
Also das heißt, die Effizienz und in Sachen alternative Daten und die Implementierung von alternativen
immer noch
Daten.
Am Anfang.
Immer noch am Anfang. Das heißt, wir haben erst das erste Drittel durch.
Ja.
Ich komme gleich zu der Frage, die ich sehr spannend finde, aber welche Rolle spielt denn heute schon die künstliche Intelligenz bei den Quant Fund? Is that developing? I mean, are they out of your experience?
Okay, künstliche means artificial intelligence, right? Now, you have to understand artificial intelligence, if you really define it appropriately, it's artificial, it's taking a human and making a machine do what a human can do. And that is still quite a ways off. If it's
even in finance,
anywhere. I mean, it's a huge leap to where we are now, to where artificial intelligence can really be called artificial intelligence, where it passes the rules, whereas it can be something could be behind a curtain, and you talk to it and it responds, and you don't even know that it's a non-human, right? You think it's another human.
Das heißt also, aus deiner Erfahrung sind wir noch eine ganze Ecke davon entfernt, obwohl es ja schon die ersten Hedgefonds gibt. In Japan gibt es auch einen Hedgefonds, der mittlerweile sagt, er agiert auf Artificial Intelligence.
Okay, so artificial intelligence is a very broad category, and it includes algorithmic trading, which is not very intelligent because it's really basically very binomial, it's very simplistic. And then the next stage would be machine learning, where it's taking all the information that it's seen in a certain transaction and then starting to make inferences based on that, which is very popular right now.
Let me translate that in German. So,
genau.
Der normale Algorithmenhandel ist im Prinzip, es wird programmiert, die Maschine macht das, was programmiert wurde, end of story.
Right. Sehr einfach.
Sehr einfach. Maschinen, und natürlich auch den Fehler, dass wenn der Mensch Mist eingibt, kommt Mist hinten raus. So, okay, so Machine Learning is still programmed, immer noch von Menschen programmiert, aber selbst lernend.
Ja, genau.
So. And then the next step after machine learning
is what's called deep learning.
Deep learning.
So there it's also known as a neural network, right? So instead of only a couple of factors being considered in a future decision, you have multiple connections with each data set. So it's kind of it's exactly the way the human mind works, right? Where you have individual cells and then you have synapses connected to other multiple cells, and it just thousands and thousands of synapses all interconnected. And that's the goal of deep learning. And deep learning is the step right before artificial intelligence. So we're steeped into still trying to figure out machine learning. And a lot of machine learning is used with unstructured data versus structured data. So the unstructured data, you throw a machine learning algorithm on top of it, and it starts to figure out patterns and then makes inferences on where something's going to happen in the future.
Also die unstrukturierten Daten werden im Bereich des Machine Learnings angewendet. Die Maschinen durch selbstlernende Effekte werden diese unstrukturierten Daten dann analysiert.
Am besten unstrukturiert, ja.
Genau so. Und dann kommt im Prinzip nach dem Deep Learning kommt dann im Prinzip die künstliche Intelligenz, aber davon sind wir noch eine Weile entfernt. Jetzt eine Frage hier von Horst, schon eine ganze Weile eingemeldet, hervorragendes Bild, Horst, ja, so locker am Strand. Und
ist so, immer auf Englisch.
Yeah, I mean, we Germans, you know that.
Natürlich.
Is it possible for the regular investor, for retail investors, to get into that investing, buy into those funds? In anderen Worten, können Privatanleger eigentlich auch in solche Art von Fonds
if you have like $1 million, natürlich.
Also du musst bei uns, I don't know what you have to be qualified investor, I think, right?
Ja.
Also und das heißt, du musst ein bestimmtes Minimumvermögen haben und ein bestimmtes Jahreseinkommen haben. Und das muss weit nördlich von $1 Million aufwärts liegen, wenn ich mich nicht irre. Ja. Und dann kommt man da rein. But I think there are the first funds that are opening their doors also to smaller investors.
It's happening.
It's happening.
Yeah, and you collect a lot of money from the smaller investors, and then that feeds up into one chunk into the larger investment. They just don't have the resources available to accommodate all the questions and concerns of individual investors on a broad basis, right? They only want to deal with the $1 million+ investors because they would have to have too many resources.
Yeah.
So there are platforms that are being built to allow for that to happen. I just met with one last week, and it's they're basically white labeling some of the bigger funds, and it allows for a smaller investment to take place through a bank. But I'll tell you what. A lot of these, the E-Trades of the world and TD Ameritrades of the world,
die Online-Broker, die traditionellen, ne?
they are giving access to a lot of the same computing power and data that you would find in a Renaissance, for example. So,
but you're talking about market data now, not alternative data.
At a price,
yeah,
you can get the alternative data because they're white labeling it into these other resources as well. So, but it's not going to be cheap.
Die Welt ist komplex und jetzt eine schöne Frage von Horst noch. Horst is a personal friend. Abnehmende Grenzen von zusätzlichen Daten. Also ich glaube, I'll explain it to you. This is one of the great German. This is like same-store sales in German. Das sind Einzelhandelsumsätze von Läden, die länger als ein Jahr geöffnet sind. So I'll explain it in English. I think I get what he means. Yeah? So if everybody in the industry, nehmen wir das mal kochen wir das mal runter auf Hochfrequenzdaten und gehen dann auf die alternativen Daten über. So if everybody in the industry wants to get faster and faster and faster, don't we get to the point where the value you're paying for faster data eventually doesn't correspond with the price anymore that you get out of it?
Well, what you're talking about is and there have been several articles written about this, very advanced article called the Singularity.
Lass mich das kurz erklären. Also der Punkt ist der, wenn jeder Fondsmanager oder jeder Investor auf einmal die gleichen schnellsten Daten hat, dann verliert die Qualität dieser Daten natürlich an Wert. Wo stehen wir an der Stelle?
So what I was saying was the singularity is when all information is available to everybody. And then it's a matter of your intellectual skill to make predictions with your own ability, but that's going to be a really, really difficult differentiator if everybody has the same data. So
und davon, laut deiner Aussagen, based on what you're explaining, if we just in the third inning, we must be very far away.
Second inning. I'd say we're in the second inning. Yeah, we're in the first third. Yeah. I think we still have, okay, so there are incredible statistics out there. That something like there is all of the data in the world today, most of the data in the world today was created within the last 5 years. Not from like 10,000 years ago to today, but like 90% of the data that's now available was only created in the last 5 years.
Also 90% aller Daten, die heute verfügbar sind, wurden erst innerhalb der letzten 5 Jahre kreiert.
And that number is going down every day I mean, there's these incredible charts that say how much data are we creating, on YouTube, on social media, on trading exchanges. The amount of data that we're generating on a daily basis continues to rise at an astounding rate. So the total amount of data in the marketplace, we're flooding from so many different sources. So there are going to be so many different types of data out there. Even if you did have all data available, I mean, where do you turn? What do you look at?
Also es geht nicht nur die Daten selber.
It's still so complex, and I think in our lifetime, I don't think you're going to have a perfect world where you have all data available to you. Although that certainly is the direction that we're going in, as you start to see the consolidation take place with all these big data companies trying to own all the data, because data has just become so incredibly valuable.
Gehen wir nochmal zurück zu der Frage hier, VW Käfer, Bluebird. I love VW Käfer, who doesn't, right? Wer entscheidet, welche Daten relevant sind? Who decides which data are relevant or not? The machine or the human?
No, the PM, the trader.
The trader. So the human.
The human.
Also es ist immer noch der Mensch, der entscheidet, welche Daten relevant sind oder nicht.
Yeah. They can tell usually. So there are, okay, well that's actually a very good question. If you're looking at who in a company is the one who makes a decision. A typical quant fund will have two main people when it comes to data. Number one, there's what's called the data buyer, also called a data scout, also called a data hunter. And the job of that person is to go out and look at all the different data sets in the world and define or identify which ones he thinks the traders are going to find value in. There's a little bit of a disconnect there, but hopefully those guys used to be traders. If they were traders and they understand the market and how to trade and what moves markets, then they're going to be good data buyers. But there are data buyers out there who are data scientists who've never traded. And that gets very frustrating for the data seller because he wants to talk to the PM. Because the PM really knows what data he wants and what he needs in order to execute with confidence a specific trade. So the data buyer and then there's the PM, Portfolio Manager.
Bart, muss man denn heutzutage eigentlich noch das Ganze, betrachtet man das noch als Trader, als Investor oder rein als Daten Scientist? I mean, you look at markets today in the traditional way, like, you got to be a trader, you have to kind of have a feel for the market, understand what's going on. Or is it enough, or as a data scientist, you look at these traders and you're like, who are these guys? It's all boiling down to data science.
You hit on a very, very important topic. Once again, a topic that we tried to cover at the Battle of Quants is the actual trader and what does he know, and then the non-trader, and how, so I'm sorry, the discretionary guy who's really trading based on the seat of his pants, the newspaper that he reads, the influences that he sees in the marketplace, and then you've got the more the quantitative guy who doesn't read the paper, who doesn't know what's going on in the world, but just looks at the numbers. And there's still a pretty wide disconnect. And the trick is to make the quant trader understand markets a little bit more, because sometimes he might get out of a trade before something is about to happen, but he's not aware that something is about to happen. He's just looking at the numbers. But there could be some takeover talks going on that aren't reflected in the numbers. But if he knew that, he might get another 1.5 points of trading profit. And the same thing with the discretionary guy. The discretionary guy who's just basically reading the newspaper and trading at the seat of his pants and doesn't want anything to do with quants because he knows better. His own mind is the quant. If he were given more data, more specifics about his trades and what makes it a good trade, or maybe information that makes it a bad trade, he can also be a more effective trader. And there are companies that are actively creating the vehicle to allow those two to come together.
Also in anderen Worten, also im Prinzip die Wahrheit liegt wie bei vielen Dingen im Leben in der Mitte. Das heißt, der traditionelle Trader, der Daten nicht anschaut, wird zu einem besseren Trader durch den Zugang zu Daten, und umgekehrt wird auch der Data Scientist durch Markterfahrung zu einem besseren Operator des Marktes. Ja, jetzt nehmen wir noch eine Frage. Wir können ansonsten alle Ewigkeit diskutieren. There's a lot of questions here, but let us take one more here before we come towards the end. This is another tricky one. Gibt es eine Verbindung zwischen Quants und der klassischen Rational Choice Theory? I don't even know if you can actually answer this question. Entscheidungstheorien mit Bezug auf Anlageströme, oder hat beides rein gar nicht? Na, holy cow. Okay, I gotta tell you, gut, dass ich diese Frage genommen habe. I don't know
so
how
is there
to
a connection
translate
between quants and
the classical rational
choice
choice
I don't know what
theory.
the classical
Rational choice theory. Das ist eine gute Frage.
Well, I think one supports another, right?
Also,
I mean, if it's a rational choice theory, the only thing the numbers are going to do is to further strengthen, like we just talked about, it's going to strengthen your decision one way or the other through hard and fast pluses and minus or yes or no answers. Entscheidungstheorie mit Bezug auf angestreute. Okay. Well, I think
it's a tough one. I mean, it's like
we do have discussions all the time at the Battle of the Quants, though, and the battle was originally named the battle because it was a battle between discretionary managers and quantitative managers. And as we continue on in the evolution of financial markets, we see the two of them increasingly coming together. So is there a Verbindung? I think that means a connection.
Yeah.
So I would say yes, there is definitely a connection, and you have software companies on both sides attempting to move to the other. So you have the quant guys trying to move more into the discretionary world and vice versa.
Yeah.
And there's actually a conference series called Learn to Quant.
Mm-hmm.
And this is for the discretionary guys who can learn from the
discretionary
lessons.
guy is the guy that makes decision based on traditional ways, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Reading the paper, having a
Zeitung
feel,
lesen, Charts lesen,
having a feel for the market. And
Marktanalyse.
these guys are incredibly valuable, right?
Yeah.
They really have a feel for the market, and they're
Yeah.
known as like the great traders. But these great traders who really excelled 10, 15, 20 years ago are fewer and fewer, far between. And now what you're finding is the real champions. So as 15 years ago, 9 out of the 10 traders were discretionary. Now it's reversed. Now it's all the quant guys.
Also früher, vor 15 Jahren, war es der traditionelle Trader im Prinzip, der Zeitung lesen, Marktberichte, Up- und Downgrades, der das Rennen gemachte, 9 von 10 waren die traditionellen Jungs, und jetzt ist es genau umgekehrt, dass 9 von 10 der guten Performer sind aus der Welt der Quants. Ja. Ich mache jetzt noch eine Frage und komme dann langsam dem Ende entgegen. Von Peter Miller nochmal die Frage: Who are those guys that usually fund these big hedge funds? Wo kommt das Geld der großen Hedgefonds eigentlich her?
Okay, so these are all the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund, although I don't know if they're actually investing in quants. But CalPERS was one of the largest
Pensionsfonds von Kalifornien.
Yeah, the biggest pension fund in the United States, which was they had the gentleman who was responsible for evaluating and investing in funds was very pioneering, and he was one of the first to actually start investing in quant funds. So it's the big pension funds,
Pensionskassen,
but endowments, and what are called funder funds.
Funder funds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the principal, like the
Family
PAMCOs
offices.
of the world. Well, of course, family offices and high net worth individuals are a big component in this market, because you have to have a certain faith in the model, and sometimes that takes a little bit more effort to get passed through a pension fund board.
Yeah.
And the pension fund board isn't necessarily very sophisticated.
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of the family offices and the high net worth individuals are much more sophisticated, and they don't need all the write-offs along the way to get an allocation approved.
Das finde ich übrigens ganz, ganz wichtigen Punkt, dass dieses Level of Sophistication, also man muss verstehen, worum es dort geht, und das setzt natürlich voraus, dass auch im Management der Finanzhäuser und der Pension Funds auch das Know-how dafür da ist, oder zumindest die Offenheit dafür da ist, das Thema aufzunehmen. And you know, one thing that I personally find very interesting is if you were, I wouldn't say stuck, but if you were in this world down on Wall Street at the New York Stock Exchange and you just focus on the floor, it seems like nothing has really changed. And then you look beyond the Tellerrand, as we say in Germany, and you really recognize how we are now living in an entirely different world. Also man darf nicht vergessen, dass das Einzige, was heute an der New York Stock Exchange noch so ist wie vor 15 Jahren, ist die Fassade. Ansonsten hat sich eigentlich alles grundlegend geändert. Das ist übrigens auch immer wieder mein Argument zu sagen, Guys, wir müssen die Finanzberichterstattung auch ändern, weil die Finanzberichterstattung eigentlich nicht mehr in dieser Form zeitgemäß ist mit dem, was in der Finanzwelt im Prinzip passiert.
The floor is a TV studio.
Yeah.
If you were to go back 20 years to the Wall Street to Wall Street, there wasn't any TV,
there was one.
any radio in sight.
You know, one
Maybe
person
there was one
there.
Right, maybe
Me.
there was, yeah, okay, you
I
were
was
there.
there.
But there were no signs for CNBC. There wasn't there you know, you just didn't have the awareness. I mean, you did have studios with people based in Wall Street. I mean, it was unbelievable. And at night, as soon as it's 5 o'clock, there's a party on the exchange floor. That was also extremely rare. It's completely,
Also die Welt hat sich komplett gewandelt. Wenn ich jetzt überlege, ich bin jetzt der Journalist, der am längsten an der New York Stock Exchange ist, 1996. I started 3 months after Maria Bartiromo started.
Wow.
CNBC. That's how old I am. I know, you know, you're astounded, right? All the makeup and everything, you know.
I'm astounded that you're a contemporary of Maria Bartiromo. That's fantastic. That's
I know,
good.
you know,
the money honey.
Good looking, you know, but it's
so
like
she's the money honey. What are you?
You know, I'm the sad figure.
Daddy Warbucks?
Daddy Warbucks, I don't know, ja. Humpty Dumpty, keine Ahnung, ja. So, Guys, wir haben viele Fragen von euch noch. Ich sag mal ganz vielen Dank, Bart, dass du hier runtergekommen bist an die Wall Street, dein Office.
Kein Problem.
Eigentlich in Midtown. Und freue mich sehr, dass du dir Zeit genommen hast dafür. Wir werden sicherlich noch oft auch über Battle of the Quants berichten. Das letzte Mal musste ich überraschen nach Deutschland, deshalb konnte ich nicht zu deinem Event kommen. Der nächste Battle of the Quants
August
ist in
13th August 13th in New York, we have a breakfast, ein Frühstück.
Ja.
Und danach, an Oktober 15. in Hongkong. Ungefähr 250 Leute.
Ja. Also ich weiß ja, der eine oder andere ist ja auch in Hongkong dabei. Ne? Wenn ihr noch nichts vorhabt, meldet euch bei uns und dann geht es da weiter. An der Stelle sage ich mal vielen herzlichen Dank, Bart. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Und ich wünsche euch noch einen schönen Tag. Bis dann. Ciao.
Wiedersehen.